Story 1. We should definitely keep the requirement that a ticket for a flight today is necessary to enter the main terminal area, as airports were previously filled with thieves and scammers when anyone could walk in. Story 2. Some post-9/11 security requirements make sense. The most obvious one is actually not airport-related, but airplane-related. The cockpit door must be locked and secured at all times during flight and should never be opened for anyone making a threat. Limiting gate access to ticket holders helps avoid baggage theft and generally reduces the number of people who need to go through security, so I support this measure. Requiring passengers to remove shoes and belts is a mixed bag anyway, especially with TSA pre-check lines often waiving this rule. It may be time to eliminate this requirement. I am particularly skeptical of the liquids rule, but I would feel better about it if airlines did not charge such high prices for checking bags, especially since there is rarely enough room in the overhead bins. Rather than a blanket rollback, I would prefer to evaluate each rule individually and ask what it actually accomplishes. Story 3. If they did this and another September 11th attack happens, the political backlash for the party that reversed the decision will always be raised during every election cycle. That is why no one will take that action. Story 4. If they are going to make us participate in security theater, they should at least amp up the drama. I want science fiction noises, lasers crossing my body, and a roughly 10% chance of seeing actors vaporized into a puff of smoke for violating the rules. Opt-in characters you can be if you want. I'm a spy crossing into West Berlin, and my wife is a career criminal on her way to steal the artificial intelligence core from Arasaka headquarters. Story 5. In principle, I understand the rules. However, the inconsistent application of them at different airports is frustrating. This can vary from day to day and even hour to hour at the same airport. Some days, the pre-check program does not require you to remove anything, while on other occasions, travelers are reprimanded by the Transportation Security Administration for not removing their coats, even when a sign says not to remove belts, shoes, or coats. I am a team player. If we could enforce security measures consistently, there would be much less frustration. Story 6. I suspect I am more in danger flying with Boeing, which has been accused of cutting corners, while whistleblowers have faced tragic circumstances. Story 7. Eliminate the requirements for shoes, belts, and liquids at screening. Maintain the boarding pass and identification requirements to prevent unauthorized individuals from entering the gate area, which is already busy. We do not need families of travelers gathering there as well. Ensure that requirements on aircraft remain in place, such as locked and sterile cockpits. Story 8. Given that Transportation Security Administration inspections miss 90% of the weapons tested, I would say that since security is doing nothing other than increasing costs, it's time for it to be reconsidered. Story 9. The Patriot Act was a turning point. It represented security theater instead of actual security. Story 10. Airline pilot here. Getting to visit the cockpit in flight was one of the pivotal moments of my childhood and one of the reasons I was inspired to learn to fly. There is no valid security risk in allowing children to visit the flight deck during cruise. If I were in charge of the Federal Aviation Administration for a day, that would be the one change I would make. It is perfectly fine to ask to see our office during boarding. Just ask the flight attendants, "Hey, my son or daughter loves airplanes. Would it be okay to say hello to the pilots?" Story 11. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are over. Osama bin Laden is dead. The Transportation Security Administration should be disbanded, and the entire system of post-September 11 reforms should be undone. The USA Patriot Act should be repealed. Real security comes from 1. Reinforced cockpit doors, and 2. Passengers and crew being motivated to risk their lives resisting hijackers, since they would likely die anyway if a September 11-style hijacking is successful. At the time, officials promised citizens, "We know this infringes on your rights. It's just a temporary measure that's necessary to deal with terrorism." Now, terrorism has been addressed, but the government completely forgot it was temporary, and they were supposed to restore our rights by now. What angers me most is that no one is even discussing the issue. Where are the conservatives demanding that the government get out of our way at the airport? Where are the liberals complaining about how airport security operates unfairly, with a focus on xenophobia and racial profiling of people of color, passed by a Republican president. Prior to September 11th, crew members and passengers were advised to give hijackers whatever they demanded while in the air and let properly trained and equipped police arrest them on the ground. This advice assumed that hijackers did not actually want to harm innocent people. Threatening them was simply a means to an end, usually money or transport to a specific country. A significant reason September 11th was successful is that hijackers willing to throw away their lives on a mission to kill random innocent people was not considered a realistic scenario. Story 12. It is absurd. We are currently regarded as one of the most disliked countries in the world, so let us eliminate all protections. Story 13. I have never really had a problem with airport security. As long as you understand how to pack your bag and what items you can and cannot bring, it is usually a quick process. Story 14. Most of it is performative nonsense that does not accomplish anything. It is a security facade. Much of it could be reversed. Story 15. When I was a kid, hijackings occurred almost every week. People wanted to go to Cuba, traveling from one country to another. It was ridiculous, but it didn't seem particularly dangerous. They told us that as long as we didn't fight back, nothing would happen. It might have been a nuisance, but generally we were all going to get back home. Since September 11th in the United States, there have been virtually no hijackings in 25 years. Before that, comedians regularly joked about airport security, which seems almost laughable in hindsight. Nobody ever likes to highlight government programs that work well, but it is difficult to argue that the Transportation Security Administration has done an excellent job of preventing incidents. They seem to be anticipating new techniques of attack, including underwear and shoe bombs, as well as other threats we may not have heard about. I find the Transportation Security Administration to be annoying, intrusive, and frustrating. However, I believe we should all feel guilty about flying on airplanes since it contributes significantly to environmental degradation. Arguing that they are doing too good a job and that we should ease restrictions might be a terrible and misguided idea. And that's putting it mildly. Story 16. Everything he is doing is destructive and will take many years for a different administration to fix, if we even make it that far. Story 17. The Transportation Security Administration was more a federal job creation program than any kind of real security measure. I didn't like the culture of fear that prevailed back in 2002. But I do appreciate it when working people have money, so I guess you could say I'm conflicted. Story 18. One of the rental car agencies had a commercial message that you would be on time for your plane if you used their check-in service. The commercials featured a famous football player running through an airport, hurdling over luggage and couches, and joking with other passengers. They would not make that commercial today because it featured O.J. Simpson. Story 19. How about we delete the Patriot Act and remove the Department of Homeland Security to regain some freedom in this country? Story 20. No changes. It isn't perfect, and there's no way this can be perfected. What we have now is an understood process, which is more than anything the organization has built in years. Story 21. My country mainly has X-ray machines for bags and a barrier between departing passengers and others. That's about all that remains from the security measures after September 11th. We never had to remove our shoes here, and taking off your belt for the metal detector was only required until around 2010. Story 22. I just want to hang out with the pilots flying the plane. Sure, I'm 50 now, but I still want to do it. Maybe get those sweet plastic wings. Story 23. You should receive a reward for passing through security without setting off the scanner or having your bag pulled for excess liquids. Consider a system where you earn a stamp on a card for each successful pass. After collecting 6 stamps, you receive a free fast pass. After 12 stamps, you gain access to a lounge. Story 24. What I don't understand is the real ID laws. I recently obtained one, and it took me multiple visits to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get it. My birth certificate was in a short form, as that's what the state issued, and listed my middle initial instead of my full middle name. For example, it showed John H. Smith instead of John Henry Smith. My social security card lists my full middle name. The DMV accused me of fraud. I ended up going to the city where I was born, not the state, and obtained a certified copy of my birth certificate that included my full middle name. What does my middle name have to do with boarding a plane? Does the way the state printed my birth certificate make me a terrorist? Story 25. I believe that whatever standard is available for purchase should apply to everyone. If I can use Clear or TSA PreCheck simply by paying a fee, why shouldn't everyone be able to fill out a form, schedule an interview, obtain approval, and then fly without removing their shoes or taking their computers out of their bags? If it is safe to sell, it should be safe to provide for free. I am frustrated with the disparity in standards between those who can afford to pay and those who cannot. Story 26. I travel frequently for work, which often gives me migraines. I dislike it. I am waiting for them to announce the new FastPass equivalent to TSA PreCheck. Story 27. It's an overcorrection that reflects panic and doesn't address the problems it intends to solve. The events of September 11th do not get prevented by the additional measures being implemented now. However, these measures do encourage people to opt for expedited boarding and pre-approval, or compel them to spend more at the airport since they must arrive 3 hours early to feel confident about catching their flight. There is profit in this, as with many things presented as safety concerns. You will encounter difficult passengers on flights, and issues will arise when operational budgets and staffing are squeezed. Taking my pen or limiting liquids does not statistically enhance safety compared to not confining people in a security check-in scenario. Story 28. If you travel frequently, it is worth getting TSA PreCheck. I take nothing off except for my carry-on to get scanned, and I am through security in about 10 minutes. I usually walk right through without waiting in line. Story 29. It seems like a good idea as we are making more enemies daily due to the small individual. Story 30. Well, now that everyone knows that shoes, laptops, and shampoo bottles greater than 4 ounces are perfect for hiding bombs, I think the cat is out of the bag. Story 31. There is some value in the theater of airport security. If criminals focus on these obstacles, they may not pay attention to what is happening out of public view. Personally, I do not find anything particularly inconvenient. The best feature is probably that without a ticket, there is no gate access. The most significant security improvement we have seen is that passengers are now vigilant to potential threats. Before September 11th, the common belief was to do nothing and wait for authorities to manage the situation. Story 32. Laughs in TSA PreCheck, also known as having my employer pay me to sell my fingerprints and personal information in exchange for what is essentially 90% of pre-9/11 rules. The best benefit is that the PreCheck lanes are typically only filled with frequent flyers, so everyone already knows to divest what they need to divest and has their identification ready before getting in line. Cough, cough. Story 33. We need to simplify some of the requirements for staff. Having worked in aviation since 2007, it is frustrating for employees. We are limited in the foods and drinks we can bring airside. Additionally, unless an airport has a reduced-rate crew canteen, staff are forced to pay the same high prices as passengers. Story 34. I don't think it is a good idea. These days, there is even more tension, social issues, and violence. Security should still be strict for airports as well as for any very large group events like concerts and sports games. Story 35. I was listening to a great podcast about the murder of Jacob Wetterling. His mother crusaded for years alongside other grieving parents to bring in laws to protect children. The problem is, very few of these laws actually protect children, even 30 years after being implemented. His mother now works with youth sex offenders and discussed on the podcast how the crusading and the laws probably went too far and accomplished nothing. I think a similar situation occurred after the attack on the World Trade Center. Changes were made and laws were passed out of fear and knee-jerk responses, yet the world is no better for it. We now live in a world of surveillance, national espionage, reduced rights, government overreach, and a culture of guilty until proven innocent. Is the world any safer for it? I support security measures, but I believe they should be reviewed periodically to ensure their effectiveness. Story 37. Studies have shown that Transportation Security Administration practices are security theater. Their ability to catch weapons has been proven to be ineffective. Story 38. Ensure you have a ticket and are not bringing firearms or explosives. Measures such as limits on liquids and removing shoes are unnecessary and should be quietly discontinued. More attention should be paid to the individuals who access the plane but are not passengers, including ground crews, luggage handlers, cleaners, and food vendors. Story 39. Ticket to enter terminal. Yes. Take my shoes off. No. Pilot never allows anyone in the cabin. Yes. Limit liquids to 100 milliliters. No. Screen all baggage for explosives. Yes. There are many other measures that were implemented, but most of them are reasonable. These are just a few of the obvious ones, in my opinion. The main changes passengers would want are related to shoes and the liquid limit. Everything else seems to be a fair security measure. Story 40. I would like to see my friends and family at the gate again. Which airports did these thieves and scammers operate in? How widespread was it? It sounds exaggerated. Were any of you even aware of such issues over 25 years ago? Are we discussing incidents at the gates or in the main areas? I don't recall much trouble at the gates. At worst, you just had to say no a few times if you encountered them at all. Story 41. I support security measures, including verifying identities with tickets and basic screening. I believe basic screening, such as X-rays, has prevented individuals from bringing prohibited items onto planes. Flying is a privilege, not a right, and authorities have the responsibility to restrict items that could compromise the safety of everyone on board. I value similar measures at major events. They make sense given the current state of the world. I would need to review the details, but I think the Transportation Security Administration could be improved like any other system. Story 42. If they made it as easy as pre-check for everyone and then chose for additional screening inside the terminal, I think that would be better. The airport is congested and chaotic enough as it is. We don't need any more people there. Story 43. The Transportation Security Administration is often criticized, as many of its workers fail in-house tests conducted by the Red Team. Most of the people I've met who briefly worked at the Transportation Security Administration absolutely disliked it and quickly moved to different agencies. While there are some good employees, the majority appear to be lazy and uninspired. I do not feel safer at all when I see them on duty. It is advisable to avoid airports like Atlanta and Los Angeles International if possible. Story 44. Modern scanners will eliminate much of the inconvenience, so there will be little incentive to roll back security checks. Story 45. The purpose of the Transportation Security Administration is not to make airport security a comfortable experience. They could probably be more polite and helpful, but overall it is such a non-issue for me. Granted, I live in Canada, and my experiences with the Transportation Security Administration are limited. Story 46. It's unnecessary, dehumanizing, and exhausting, existing only as an exhibition of authoritarianism. Therefore, we should consider privatization. Story 47. The way schools and malls are experiencing gun violence, I am comfortable with security checks at airport entrances to ensure that no one brings firearms into these spaces. It is troubling to think about individuals with violent fantasies in large public areas, and I cannot imagine the fear of being on a plane with someone like that. There are no escape routes or emergency procedures in that situation. Story 48. Great idea. I would much rather face extreme consequences than endure a minor inconvenience and wait in line. Story 49. It's being done for all the wrong reasons, but the Transportation Security Administration has up to a 90% failure rate when its security has been tested. So it's not like they were doing very well. Story 50. In case anyone needs a refresher on what is different about airport security after September 11th versus before, what was the same before September 11th? 1. Carry-on bags went through X-rays. Everyone going into the terminals had to go through a metal detector. Most weapons were not allowed through security. What changed after September 11th? 1. Liquids in carry-on bags are limited to 3.4-ounce containers in a single 1-quart Ziploc bag. Only ticketed passengers are allowed into the terminals. Stricter definitions on what constitutes a weapon. The addition of body scanners, which remain optional, and those with pre-check usually do not go through them. It is unlikely that we will see any of these post-September 11 restrictions completely lifted. The fact is, it has been this way for a quarter of a century now and people are accustomed to it. No one wants to be the person who lifted restrictions only for an airline terror attack to occur. At best, we may see a small loosening of some restrictions, such as allowing unticketed passengers in if they apply for a pass, already a practice in some airports, or perhaps allowing larger containers of liquids, but samples of those liquids must still be tested or screened. Story 51. Considering the Transportation Security Administration fails to identify mock explosives and firearms approximately 90% of the time, I couldn't care less if they eliminate the whole operation. It's just for appearances, to be honest. That said, the cockpit rule should still apply. Story 52. In today's environment, civil order is starting to crack. Who knows? I don't think someone is going to hijack a plane at knife point, but plenty of reckless individuals will have the opportunity to take things they shouldn't on planes. Story 53. The original shoe bomber incident occurred over 20 years ago. I believed they should have eliminated that threat permanently. Recently, however, someone was caught attempting to smuggle items in their shoes. Story 54. As long as it is the ineffective security measures, I am fine with them. Having to remove my shoes and ensure all my bottled liquids are under a certain weight is simply unnecessary and does not prevent anyone from hijacking or bombing a plane. Story 55. Going through the Transportation Security Administration frustrates me. I dislike every employee there. It feels like a performance designed to make us more compliant. I recently flew to Costa Rica with a lighter, and upon my return, they took it away. By now, everyone should recognize how ineffective this security measure is. If a terrorist wanted to harm a significant number of people, they would find it challenging to do so on a plane. However, detonating a bomb in the security line would be an easier method. The Transportation Security Administration has never stopped a terrorist. It's all for show. It should be abolished. Story 56. They already rolled them back. It costs $78 every 5 years for TSA pre-check. It is a small fee to avoid the inconvenience of security checks or using the full-body scanner. Most travel cards also include TSA pre-check, clear, or global entry as a complimentary benefit. It's minimal, just get it even if you fly once every other year. Story 57. As someone who works at an airport, I can say that security measures are often inadequate. There are much easier ways to carry out malicious activities if someone is determined to do so. Story 58. I believe the security measures are excessive and make the entire experience unpleasant. How many criminals have actually been caught? How many planes have been compromised due to someone bringing 8 ounces of shampoo instead of 3? One individual brought a bomb in his shoe, and now we all have to remove our shoes before boarding. Additionally, the costs to our country are significant. However, we should maintain immigration enforcement at airports to address people who may not have accommodations upon arrival. That incident occurred yesterday, but I was joking about maintaining immigration enforcement. Story 59. I am fine with it. Most of our security measures only stop incompetent criminals and inconvenience the rest of us. I would love to see the real numbers on how many potential criminals have been detained by the Transportation Security Administration. Story 60. Remove the 100 milliliter fluid requirement. Keep the boarding pass requirement to enter the security area. Can we standardize airport requirements? I had luggage that was cleared in Budapest, Vienna, Prague, and Amsterdam, but the French airport in Nice made me throw away some souvenirs and utensils for unspecified reasons. I already flew 3 times with those items, and only here are they threatening to call security if I don't give them up. Every major airport should have security scans comparable to those in Japan. I didn't have to take anything out of my bags when they scanned them, unlike London Heathrow, where I had to walk the security officer through every single item, and they even wanted me to take off my shoes. Flying can be so frustrating due to the seemingly arbitrary security requirements and how they are enforced across countries and even local airports. Story 61. I think it's a good thing. Adam Conover created a video explaining how airport security is mostly for appearances and isn't very effective at preventing smuggling. The air marshals are the ones who actually do the most. Story 62. I'm fine with the current setup. It's annoying, but if I have to go through with it, that means other individuals must also go through it. It's streamlined enough now that it's not much of a hassle, except for the shoe part. What they could improve is leave a shoehorn at the security checkpoint so you can put your shoes on easier and faster. If you have a bottle of water, they should allow you to prove it's water by drinking some of it. Provide more space so that more people can process through the checkpoint faster. Story 63. Definitely time. It's security theater anyway. The 3-ounce liquid limitations are ridiculous. If 20 bad individuals brought a quart bag full of 3-ounce dangerous chemicals, they could get through security and meet in a bathroom to combine the dangerous substances. What a hurdle to overcome. Meanwhile, we have to worry about how much toothpaste we take with us. Story 64. Here's a tip passed on to me by a Transportation Security Administration agent. Freeze your liquids. They are no longer liquid and can now pass through the scanner. They took our aloe vera lotion, but she said, next time, freeze it. Story 65. Let us keep our shoes on and bring liquids. They should evaluate any restriction that has not found a bomb in 25 years. Story 66. I believe everyone who wants to board a plane should undergo the same verification process required for Transportation Security Administration PreCheck and global entry at no cost to anyone. Then we can consider rolling back the requirements further. Story 67. I'm not flying until they do. The last time I flew was in 2019, and I refuse to be treated like cattle again. Story 68. There is a show called Adam Ruins Everything that covers a topic about airport security and how the Transportation Security Administration has stopped zero attacks since its inception. Story 69. All I ask is for you to check out the outrageous content the Transportation Security Administration posts on their Instagram account. Then tell me you want them to search less. Story 70. If visa processing is moved back to a US-based company instead of a UAE-based company or done by the government, absolutely. Story 71. I would like flying to feel luxurious again. Even with lounge access, it feels like they served poor quality food on a somewhat decent-looking plate. Story 72. It is all security theater and does not make anyone safer. It simply conditions us to give up our privacy and surrender. We are safer from hijackings now because policies in airplanes have changed. It used to be that they permitted terrorists to take over, believing that giving in would prevent loss of life. Now, the cockpit doors remain closed, even if they are harming passengers and flight crew. Story 73. Rolling back post-September 11 airport security is tricky. While some measures may feel excessive, they have made flying safer. Any changes would need to carefully balance security with convenience and potential risks. Story 74. What are we going to do with Transportation Security Administration employees? It is a job program for those who would likely not be able to find gainful employment in any other role. Story 75. The hassle is worth the inconvenience. Traveling is very easy if you give yourself enough time and proper preparation. Story 76. I would rather keep post-September 11 security measures in place. I remember September 11th, and it was horrific and traumatic. If someone is annoyed about security, I don't care. Get over it. Story 77. In the age of school shootings, I don't think it makes sense to reduce security. I do not want people bringing guns and bombs onto airplanes. I believe we need to require the Transportation Security Administration, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Department of Homeland Security to be more transparent and fair in their policies. There should not be lists that result in American citizens being stripped of their rights or coerced in secret. Story 78. I would have been fine with it before the Trump administration. But now, I think we need the Transportation Security Administration's current regulations for our safety. If these individuals are willing to shoot down a school, I don't even want to know what they will do with an airplane. Story 79. I don't think people would sit idly by as terrorists walk down the aisles anymore. They would be subdued or neutralized immediately by passengers. Story 80. Maybe hire a crew of teens with tablets to audit it. It was said to save $1 billion, but ended up only saving $1.75 million. Then there was a return to in-air explosions. Story 81. I am very much in favor of it. The main reason for taking extraordinary precautions on a plane after September 11th is to prevent the aircraft from being taken over and turned into a weapon. Individuals not interested in using a plane as a weapon can still cause significant death or damage with explosives and firearms without needing to involve an aircraft at all, particularly if they are willing to die in the act. Therefore, the precautions that really matter for planes are those necessary to prevent the aircraft from being taken over and crashed into something, which chiefly concerns strengthening the cockpit door and imposing security protocols on when and how it is opened. I welcome input from experts on this issue. To clarify, I am in favor of maintaining precautions regarding the cockpit, but I feel that measures such as removing shoes and restrictions on liquids are excessive and should be reconsidered. Story 82. Unfortunately, I don't think it's feasible now. Terrorist groups have only increased since then, and there are a significant number of dangerous individuals around now as well. It's a necessary challenge at this point. They do have pre-check programs that make it a lot more tolerable. Story 83. I would be fine with it, but now companies like Clear are exploiting it for profit, so I doubt they would let that revenue source go easily. However, regarding the security aspect, they generally miss a lot of issues during testing, so is it even worth it at all? Story 84. About time. It was never really more than security theater anyway. It didn't make anyone demonstrably safer, just increased the federal payroll and cost us all a significant amount of extra tax money, privacy, and inconvenience. What we should have been funding was the recruitment and training pipeline for qualified air traffic controllers. There was a personnel shortage even before the former president decided to cut federal funding and blame diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wouldn't fly a U.S. airline these days unless you paid me enough to ensure my family would be financially comfortable in the event of an accident. Story 85. There are two things that security technologies cannot tell you: why you set off the metal detector and what that unusual shape is in the X-ray. Both scenarios require human intervention. This intervention necessitates a hands-on approach for personnel to ultimately investigate the cause of the concern. With personnel needed for the process, a full team is essential. For this reason, we may make some adjustments to the procedure, but the workforce remains. It takes many individuals to operate even a minimum crew at an airport during operating hours. Other procedures, particularly those involving liquids, further demonstrate that X-ray technology cannot accurately identify certain substances. There is no technology, aside from Raman spectroscopy, that can identify liquids at an affordable price. However, Raman spectroscopy uses a laser, and risk management guidelines prohibit lower-level government employees from handling it or placing it in locations accessible to children. Perhaps we should consider a more streamlined process of body scanners for all passengers instead of just those with expedited screening. This process still requires human intervention when alarms are triggered, providing a smoother experience for everyone without reducing staff. Story 86. The requirements were established in response to the events of September 11th. We should not compromise these standards to avoid further tragedy. Story 87. Make pre-check free and double the security lines, making them all pre-check, except for the few that aren't pre-check. The non-pre-check lines should be the exception. Story 88. Could someone pull off a hijacking? On September 11th, the passengers killed the hijackers on the last plane. I fully believe this could happen again. The armored doors of the cockpit are really all that is needed. Could planes be blown up? Sure, but not used as weapons to crash into targets. Story 89. The United States is a dangerous place due to individuals affiliated with hate groups being appointed to government positions. Do you really think that's safe? I grew up around the Ku Klux Klan and know who they all are. Many of them secured jobs at the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Jacksonville and as police officers, and now a significant number hold public office. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.